Hi, we're Marty and Troy Rand. We are creators of a passion-filled marriage program. And we have created a passion-filled marriage over the years, obviously. But we were first married previously to two other people, obviously. So,
Well, I don't know. Some people get married to
yeah, that's
previous
true.
one a couple
We're
times.
married to different people though. So,
Right.
yeah. And our first marriages sucked in plain language. So,
And both ended in divorce, as
yes,
you would assume, since we're
Yes.
now married.
yes, for sure.
So I was very young when I got married. I was only 19. And high school sweetheart. And to be honest, I actually knew when I got married that this probably wasn't the best choice, but being young and dumb, I was going to show everybody we were going to make it. And we're going to have to stop because I'm going to cough.
Hi, we are Marty and Troy Rand, creators of a passion-filled marriage program. We are.
We created a passion-filled marriage.
That's just
Founders of Divorce Proof Your Marriage, creators of a passion-filled,
Okay,
right?
right.
Or, I
And
mean,
then
that's kind of what we've been. The company itself is Divorce Proof Your Marriage. Right? Sure.
hi, we are Marty and Troy Rand. We are founders of Divorce Proof Your Marriage Coaching and creators of a passion-filled marriage program. Even though we've created a passion-filled marriage over the last 15 plus years, we did not have that in the beginning. In our first marriages, for sure. So
Yeah.
we were both previously
It was a
married,
struggle.
and they really sucked in general. So yeah.
So I was 19 when I first got married, high school sweetheart. To be honest with everybody, I probably knew that day that, or before that day, that this probably wasn't the best choice for us, my life, whatever. But I was young and dumb, and I was going to show everybody that we were going to make it. So, and as all marriages are, not everything was bad, but of course, when it ends in divorce, it's more bad than good. There was just a lot of selfishness going on, more on my counterpart's part. It was all about him and what he needed and what he wanted to do, and not necessarily a compromise. There was a definite financial issues. When I was growing up, I was a saver. I had a bank account with money in it, and I saved up for my purchases. And after I got married, it was spend, 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 and I didn't feel like I had any say in what could happen with the money. So of course there was money fights, but my fights were, nobody talked. They were silent fights, internal struggles.
I
Yeah, no. And just not feeling heard, right? Or if I felt, that things were bad, I couldn't talk about it with him, because then I was accusing him and blaming him and attacking him. And of course, then if he felt that way, then of course he didn't talk. But I never felt like I could tell him how I was feeling without him feeling, that I was attacking him. So that made any growth in our marriage non-existent, right? I mean, we just didn't communicate at all. Yeah, I mean, we'd go, good morning, good night type of thing, and probably nothing in between. And then probably the most hurtful part is the infidelity. He traveled for work, which I didn't think anything of until, one night I get a phone call and it's a lady on the other end and asking for, I don't know, Charles, Charlie, Chaz, I don't know. Anyway, a version of his name that he didn't go by. and so that was the first time, right? I don't know where she was from. I don't know, anything like that. We went to counseling, we separated, we got back together, had a kid, try to work through things or muddle through things. And then brainiac idea, oh, let's have a second child. Because children fix everything.
Right.
I love my
They're
children.
gonna fix the problem that we have.
Right. I do love my children though, so I would not change that for the world. But it's like as clear as day in my mind. So I'm 8 months pregnant. I have a red and white polka dotted swimsuit on. We're at the pool with our first child, and there's a big old bruise on his neck, like a hip, right? And I was just flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe it. So, of course, when we got home, there was a big fight. An actual fight, like
communication
yelling.
then.
There was communication then. Just devastated, right? Like, because I had no clue. I just totally oblivious. Like, I thought things were actually going pretty well. So yeah, that was a big issue. And then probably the worst part was after our youngest was born, she had to be put back in the hospital because she had an infection. And so my oldest was at a friend's house and he was supposed to pick her up and she never did. Or he never did, sorry. And of course he was with her. And I had to leave my daughter in the hospital to go get my other daughter because he was nowhere to be found. So that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And so it was just a lot, again, right? Most marriages are like this, but just the pain, the lack of communication, the lack of common respect of, a life together, right? We were living his life, not our life. And I don't know, it was not something I ever wanted to go through again. And at that point I was like, I don't ever want my children to feel like that's a normal marriage, right? I mean, to me, marriages were supposed to be loving and communicative. And yes, you have your ups and downs, but you work through them and you grow. And that just wasn't happening. And I was unhappy and I didn't want them to think they should be unhappy in a marriage because I had 2 daughters. And I just thought, okay, I'm a role model of what their marriage is going to look like. And I just broke my heart thinking this is what I was setting them up to think was normal and be okay for their lives. Because as you all know, if you have children or nieces and nephews, you want them to have a better life than you. So, and then divorce.
My marriage did not end quite like that. So I got married while I was in chiropractic school, actually. Younger than I should have, obviously, also, as Marty did. Was not ready for marriage, and neither one of us were. So the lack of respect that Marty mentioned at the end of hers, I mean, that was a big part in our marriage. And it wasn't just me and it wasn't just her. It was both of us really didn't respect each other.
And it wasn't all his fault. I don't want people to think
Right.
that either. I mean, but
For sure. It takes two, and it always takes two,
Right.
right? So,
good or bad.
but even if one's trying to work on the problems, it takes two to work
Right.
on the problems.
Sorry.
obviously. But, yeah, no, you're good. I mean, and so I finished chiropractic school. We had 2 kids as I was going through chiropractic school, a little boy and girl, and thought the kids were going to kind of make things better and make us happier. And it didn't necessarily turn out like that. We didn't have the lack of communicating problem. The problem is the communication was always in a louder voice. It wasn't just talking and trying to work through things. It was accusing, it was blaming. It was fighting a lot, and I remember multiple times just not wanting my kids to be around that, right? I didn't grow up like that. I didn't want my kids to grow up with their parents just fighting all the time. So we decided to separate after a while. And so we were separated. I actually went and lived with my parents for a little bit, took the kids with me kind of here and there and whatever. And so we were separated, and it was 4th of July was coming up. And we were having our normal fights and all that type of stuff. And I remember her wanting to take the kids to Detroit for the 4th of July. And that literally scared the shit out of me because it's right next to Canada, obviously, right? So she could have taken the kids and I would have never seen them again, right? Just with the problems that we were having, I really thought that's what was going to happen. So, so at that point, I decided to file for divorce. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, but I was literally scared I wasn't ever going to see the kids again. So that's what brought on my divorce finally. Is I just realized there was no point in continuing to try to work on something if I'm the only one working on it or trying to work on it. It's not going to happen, and I just can't do everything in the marriage. And that was the other big part was. I took the kids to Sunday school. I did all the stuff with the kids lots of times. I took them to practices. I mean, there was just a lot of one-sided things that I just couldn't put up with anymore. And that's what ended up, me filing for divorce and moving on, realizing that hopefully I'll be happier afterwards. And the kids will see that part of me rather than just the angry, mad part of me all the time. So, yeah, when we got divorced, though, I didn't really know it's, how do I say that? It's kind of demeaning a little bit. Not necessarily demeaning, but it's like I was a failure, right? I mean, I went to chiropractic school. I became a doctor. I was taking care of patients all the time. I was helping other people, but yet I couldn't keep my marriage together, right? So it was like I failed, so it took a while to come around from that, and to even want to pursue a long-term relationship.
And then I jumped back in his life.
And then her mom forced her away, stopped in and saw me, and now she came back in my life. And then she tried to run away, and
then he came after
I came after her. Not literally, but I told her she wasn't just quitting. So
there was some time in between
There
divorce and
there was a couple of years in between divorce and us getting back together, but so we got married on April Fool's Day.
Right, but I think in between there I shouldn't speak for you, a lot of growth, right? Like reflection on the past marriage, and if I did get into another long-term relationship, right? Because you always wonder, do I want to go through that again or not? What would be the breaking point and what were my limitations and expectations, right? I mean, we all have expectations going into a marriage, but we just don't ever usually talk about them. So even if you've never been married, you have expectations of what you want your marriage to look like, even if it's just that fairy tale marriage, right? So I think those few years for me gave me time to, reflect on that and grow and mature in, what I wanted my marriage to look like if it would ever happen again.
Yeah, my couple years in between, I focused on making sure God was in my kids' life for sure. Because I got my kids every weekend, which is a whole nother story in itself, but yeah, so I had my kids every weekend. So I made sure they were at Sunday school and we were at church every Sunday. So I guess in me making sure God was in their lives growing up, he just kind of came in and was center on my life at that moment in time, right? And I remember just making sure whatever happened in the future, that's where it needed to be, is the church I needed to be part of the church pretty significantly, and have God in my life consistently, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we brought into our marriage, right? And I don't know when Marty got to that point, but it was pretty early on, or she was already there. But it was just kind of we just did that. We went to church all the time, every week. We made sure the kids were involved in all this stuff. And it was never we had to kind of thing. It was the right thing to do because that's how you do create a very good marriage and a marriage that's full of passion in my mind, because the closer you get to God, the closer you get to each other, obviously.
Yeah, I think, shortly after getting my divorce, I had a hard time with the church because I was Catholic, right? You're not supposed to get divorced. And, if you get annulled, I had a hard time with, well, then what happens to my children, right? Because then if I'm annulled, I'm not married. And then I had 2 kids out of wedlock. And so I had to work through all of that. And, and that's okay, right? But it did bring me back to God. It did bring me back to church, maybe not the Catholic Church, but, and knew that, he had to be the center of whatever I did, marriage, life, whatever. It had to be his terms, not my terms, which when I was younger, it definitely wasn't that way. I'd like to go to church more, but, the other half didn't,
Yep.
Or travel, and I didn't want to go to church for myself. I know you took the kids to Sunday school, but you didn't
Go to church
right?
necessarily. Right.
So, that's still a difference too of, now, right?
For sure.
And then the other big thing is the self-care too, right? Is ensuring you're taking care of yourself, so you can care for others and be a blessing to others and stuff too.
When we came into the marriage, we basically set the ground rules for our marriage from the very beginning.
Yep.
Right. Marty asked some very intimate questions before we even
And very
got
vulnerable.
before we got
Vulnerable is
very far
beautiful.
in. It
Vulnerable
is.
is beautiful.
Vulnerable is part of the reason I chased after you. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so we asked the questions that were important to us early on in our relationship to make sure that it was even worthwhile for us to continue. Right. So even from the beginning of our marriage and our relationship, I think we were intentional in a lot of things that we did. So that really is what pushed us from the point that we were at to where we are now, and to where we've become over the years. So I think it's just the intention that we started with kind of put it in a different place. And
willing to do the work, right?
Right.
You can always have good intentions, but if you don't do the work, then it doesn't get done, right? And again, as we've said on the previous marriages, work was trying to be done, but it's got to be done by both parties.
yeah, and so I remember in 2012, after we'd been married for, we were married for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we were married for 7 years, and then there was a marriage retreat that we went to, and Marty was very resistant. She didn't want to go.
No, I was afraid. I was very, very
But what we
afraid
learned at
that we would be on separate ways, right? I really did not. I don't know. We didn't have a bad marriage up to that point at all, but there was just still some, I don't know if you want to call it divide, or I don't know, something, but that I just didn't feel like we were moving in the same direction. And I was really afraid going there that this was going to be the part that we really opened our eyes to see that we weren't going in the same direction. And that scared me.
But that was
Very
not the
much.
case at all.
No,
We
wasn't.
came away from that
Pleasantly
weekend.
surprised.
We came away from that weekend probably closer than we had ever been. And we learned how to intentionally grow our marriage into what we called it. And at that point, we decided to have a passionate love affair, right? So everybody talks about having a love affair, but they think I'm going to have it with somebody else, right? That's what love affairs are. But we got to the point to where we started to work on creating a passionate love affair with each other, right? So ever since then, it's been completely different.
Right. Still not smooth sailing, right?
We're not perfect.
We don't want you to think that we don't have our ups and downs and our bumps in the road, right? But that was one thing we talked about before we even got married, was what are we willing to work through and what are we not, right? And for me, it was just one thing, right? I just couldn't go through the whole infidelity thing again. So So that's, that's the way it is.
For sure. So yeah, so that's what we've learned, and that's what, we're working to try to share with everybody else, is what we figured out and how we have created a passionate love affair with each other, to this day.
Yeah.
And, it just keeps getting better. So,
Well, and I mean, and you said everyone else, but I mean, we want to share it with you, but our main focus is for our children.
Right.
We want them to have, maybe they don't want a passionate love affair, right? Maybe they want some other kind of marriage, but whatever it is, we want them to have the tools to get there. And, I don't know if we ever achieve it, but to consistently, intentionally work towards that. When one of your children tells you your marriage is what they want theirs to emulate, like that is the best feeling ever in the world. So it's just amazing to have your children see, the marriage that you have and how good it is, and, and the struggles too, but able to work through them, it means a whole great deal.
for sure. All right. This is Troy and Marty reminding you to keep God first, your spouse second, and intimacy always.
And have more sex.